my shop. My name is Tony, and today I'm working on a laminated plywood lighthouse. I picked up a whole box of these really cool glass insulators from a friend of mine who used to work for the power company. And he had a big box of them. He was getting ready to clear out his garage. And I looked at him and I said, you know, this would make really cool lighthouses, you know? And I live in an area with lots of little lakes and stuff, and people like to decorate their cabins that way. So I went ahead and cut up some plywood. This is not the really high-end stuff. This is not birch, marine ply, or anything like that. This is just a standard sheet of plywood to do as a kind of an experiment to see how this would work. I'm going to go from a 6-inch base to a 4-inch top, and then we're going to use some padauk probably up here for the red ring. Then we'll set that on top, and I might make a little lid for it as well. And then the bottom, we're going to put a walnut base on it. But right now, I just wanted to see, will this work? So I glued it together, already drilled a hole for my lamp rod down the middle, pressed it on in the lathe, and then also used some clamps overnight. At the end of the video, there's a whole thing on milling it and all that. I know that a lot of my turner friends don't want to watch table saws going, and joiners and drill presses and stuff, but I included it just so you could kind of see what the process was like. This took about 45 minutes from start to finish to cut up just a piece of scrap plywood I had in the shop from building the press for my segmented rings. I had to buy a full sheet of plywood to build that press, and I ended up with a little 36 by 48 inch piece that has plenty of wood left over to do this. So I'm going to set up, get a sharp bowl gouge, see if we can get a nice finish on this, and if we can taper it the way I'm picturing in my vision, you know, 6 inches here, 4 inches on the top. We'll just see how it goes. Stick with me and we'll get a cool thing going here. Thanks. Okay, so we're going to start obviously with a mask and face shield on, and with the power at all the way to 0. I've already spun it around to make sure it's clear of my tool rest. I'm using the large, robust tool rest here. So we'll go ahead and spin it up with me out of the line of fire here. And I'd like to get it to, you know, close to 800, 900 RPM minimum until we start getting it around. Not feeling any shaking here. A little shaking starts right around 800 RPM. The densities of plywood are quite different. Make sure our tailstock's cranked up nice and tight here. And that feels pretty good. And then we'll go downhill a little bit here. Just see how it cuts. Okay, should get a little bit of tear out to start with here until we start getting to right a full bevel. But I think we're going to get close here. And I'd like to stay in as close as I can so we don't get any bouncing and vibration. All right. Try from the other end here a little bit. This is my second plywood project. I did another one out of the Baltic birch, and it made a big difference in how it cut. And I could definitely feel the difference here. But we'll just keep at it. I think I'm a little high. I'll try to lower it down a little bit and make sure that we're not going to catch any corners here. Keep at it. It's going to be a slow process. I'll probably speed through this. You can already see we're getting some tear out, so I got a very sharp bowl gouge. Just put an edge on it. I'll be stopping a lot just to see if our cuts are getting better, if we're still pulling out anything. And they are getting better as we get closer in. And again, a lot of this will sand and fill very nicely once we get to that portion of the project here. I also recall last time I turned plywood that I had some issues with needing to really sharpen it up frequently. So I'll obviously probably be stopping quite often to sharpen. See, as we get closer in, we're getting tighter and tighter cuts. Going that direction seem to work better. And again, it's going to take some time to get it round, but I think it'll be worth it for that look of a stack like this. I think it'll be a pretty look. We'll see. We will see. Since we're doing a cone, I've got to make sure that I'm keeping my my angle in here. We don't want to end up being flat against it. Obviously, this has to be round first anyway, but we do want to keep that taper. Important part of the look. It's not too bad. I'm going to work on keeping it nice and tight here and working my way down. Once we get one contiguous flat here, we'll know that we're on the right track. We're almost round at the base here, getting close to it anyway. I'm going to take another run the other direction, try to, well, make sure we get rid of this first. We want one full contiguous string there. And yep, we're still sharp. We'll take a last pass before we go back to the sharpness. Whew. Okay, time to sharpen. Close. That's going to be pretty. Interesting looking stuff, huh? Got to keep stopping to see if we're getting all of our flats. We got one little flat left in here. Now, obviously, I could have cut all these round on a circle jig first. That might have saved me a little bit of time. But I didn't do that. Got everything up here. Okay, we're gotten rid of everything here. We can still work on our taper, but now we're going to work down into the next layer, and then all the way down to our round. And then we'll work on the final shape. You can tell when we get off of the round, we got a clip right in there we got to get to. But it's we're making progress. You can see a little bump right in there. If we can get in there. We're almost round here, so we're going to keep our same angle and try to get down to this next round spot. Yeah, making progress. Okay, let's get another sharpening. Okay, nice fresh edge on the bull gouge. Take some smaller cuts here. And I went in a little too narrow there, so we're going to have to adjust for that. You can see where I'm making my mistake here. We want to maintain that same angle all the way down. Just to cut in. So I'm going to have to really come up with a method to get that angle right. Still think we have some flats yet, quite a bit. You can see where we're going to have to taper this, which we might want to go up to do that once we get to that spot. But first we got to finish rounding this off down here. Almost got a little bit around here left to go. Try that same thing all the way down here. Get way back on the tool, hold it down on the rest. There's a couple of edges here. I can keep the tip on it just right. Oops. Here there's still some flat down there, but we're round everywhere else. Just a little bit of flat there. And the space is a little wide anyway, so that's not going to be a problem. You can see we've got some inconsistencies, which I kind of expect with my skill level, but we've got a little inconsistency at the top here, which will flare back in and down. And then we should end up with a pretty good cone here. I still feel that we're a little kind of missing the mark here. And that felt like we got rid of the flat altogether. And we have. Got a little gap right there. So we can go up this direction, and then I'm going to fill it. Do a little bit of filling, look for areas where we got some tear out and stuff before we get to sanding. So I'm actually going to, see if I can move this out of the way here. Okay. I'm going to come in from the other angle here and just try to take care of our taper. Feels like it's going pretty good. We've got a pretty consistent taper. It feels pretty good. So at this point, I'm going to take anywhere where I had a big blowout, a gap like that in the plywood. Got a few places, and we're just going to fill those in with some CA, standard old medium CA, and then that will give us a nice spot in there where we can go through and fill that. We'll just keep each one of those filled up. It'll just give it a nicer finish on the end. When you got something big like this up here, though, I'll probably take a little of our sawdust here, and I'll load that up pretty good in there before we put any CA. We've got plenty, so kind of pack it in and really just kind of push it all the way in there before we completely layer it. I'll put one layer down in there now, and then we'll put another layer on top of that. Just let that kind of soak in there. Little hole. So that's one of the things with not using the Baltic birch, the void-free plywood, is you are going to have to deal with some of this kind of stuff. But this will be real easy for us to do a nice light scrape with a super sharp refiner type scraper. I have Richard Raffin's version of that from Henry Taylor from back in the day. And we'll use that to get in there and fill that up nice. Or at least get a nice scrape on the outside before we start to sand. We want to be a little bit proud so we keep our round, right? That's our big thing to look for. Oops. Almost, I can feel it. There's one squirt left. But I do have a fresh bottle of that we can get out. See, just little holes like this. I want to make sure they're full. I don't think structurally it'll make any difference at all, but I think aesthetically it will. Even though this is just a prototype for a segmented version that I want to do, we'll make it look like it's actual bricks. That's my thought here. So I'm going to do one of these in maple, and I think I'm going to use an ebony veneer between each of them, so it'll look like mortar, and it'll be like a full like lighthouse replica. Of course, that's going to take me, solid week of milling and gluing up and stuff like that, but I do think it'll be pretty and worth the effort. And that's kind of what we're looking for, right? Something that a customer who's got a nice lake house would want in there. And not just like, hey, I went to Cost Plus World Market or Hobby Lobby and I picked myself up a lighthouse. I want something that really looks like it belongs there. So I've got a brand new Starbond accelerator here. So I will take my Pinocchio nose off of the other one, put it on this. Starbond has been very good to us. Again, I'm going to have to... For now, it'll be easy enough to get a few squirts in, but I'm going to have to end up changing bottles later because the hose that goes to the bottom here to fill this is not long enough for the big bottle. So you're supposed to put it in a little bottle, but I never do. One time, I actually poured my accelerator glue into my accelerator bottle accidentally when I was refilling, and sure, I'm not the only one who's ever done that, but I'm definitely probably the only one who'll ever admit it. It was not happy. I'm like, wow, that was $85 worth of glue and accelerator I just screwed up. So most people wouldn't take the time on plywood, to be honest, filling in every little void and gap. But I do think for what we're going to try to accomplish here that it's going to be worth the extra effort and will end up looking pretty. And I think for my last plywood project, I don't know guys if you ever saw the spider bowl, but I did a Rebecca DeGroot style legged walking bowl, but I did the whole thing out of plywood as part of a challenge. And you couldn't tell. It looked like I had stacked layers and layers of expensive veneers to make the bowl. And I'm like, oh, it's a $45 sheet of plywood. So you could get a lot of cool stuff out of plywood if you take the time. Again, I normally only use local recycled, timbers that come down in various wind accidents or something that has to be addressed for safety reasons. It's kind of my normal routine. But every now and then I'll do something out of the ordinary, like plywood, or pick something up at the wood store where they've got some exotic wood or something like that, just to try something different. I do love turning padauk. I don't like turning Purple Heart, but it ends up in a lot of my projects if I'm doing a flat work, especially because it just adds such a neat contrast. And it's kind of rough to, you can do it with colors and stuff. You can dye maple and birch and alder and stuff like that, but I prefer to use the real thing if I have the opportunity. Okay, I think most of those pretty tight. Here's a loose one over here. Okay, I'm going to let this dry set for a minute. Even though we're using accelerator, I like to give it about 4 or 5 minutes to make sure that especially when something soaks into the wood, that I'm not going to get it splashing up in my face mask. Especially on my Micro Air 3, I don't want to be replacing that hood. Are we full there? No, see, there's a little hole here that just keeps soaking up it's going deeper into the wood than I thought. But that's what you get with plywood, right? There's lots of little voids and stuff. All right, let's let that settle up, and I will go sharpen up our refiner style scraper. I say refiner because that's what Tomislav is calling it these days. And I've always used that style from Richard Raffin, watching all his videos and his videotapes and VHS stuff growing up. So when I started turning, that was kind of my go-to. He was like the first guy that I saw stuff with. YouTube's totally changed that. You can go get some turning lessons from some of the best in the world now without having to go buy a videotape or wait for a conference or something. It's pretty cool, the world we live in now. But then you also get stuck with, hacks like me with YouTube channels. So, It's a trade-off. It's a trade-off. All right, let's go sharpen up. I'll be right back. Here's the tool I was talking about. This is the Richard Raffin Henry Taylor's high-speed steel from Sheffield. It's dynamic version, and it's the Richard Raffin's scraper. So this is the style he does. I put a burr up on the top, and we'll see if we can peel this out, make it nice and flat. Got our speed up a little bit. We'll keep the handle slightly elevated. Should give us a pretty good fill. We got a little color left here and there. But flatness wise, we're ready to sand just about. I got a couple of, I can feel a little something in the middle here. So I'm going to get a little bit closer, line up, take one more scrape. Again, we're keeping the handle slightly elevated so we don't get a catch. And we've got the speed up a little over 1,000 RPM. Make sure we're good tight on the end there. Again, handle slightly elevated. Trying to keep my finger behind it for our distance, so keep it nice straight so you can feel where there's a little bump. Go. Okay, like normal, I will put you on turbo mode. I'm going to start sanding this at actually 80 and work all the way up to 800 on this. And we'll stop and take a look and see how things look as we're going. I will pull you back in when we're ready to actually put the grit on it and polish it. And then we're going to sand this bottom nice and flat. I might be able to do it with the skew. Come in here and just peel this last layer off so we get a nice flat top and bottom, and then we're going to glue on our decorative pieces, our walnut for the base and a little thin piece of padauk up here for our rim. We already have the hole drilled for the pipe, so putting the wiring up the lamp should be pretty easy. Sorry about that, guys. You're all covered in dust. I didn't even notice. So I'll put you on turbo and we'll go from there. Okay, we've sanded, as you saw, all the way to 800. It is glassy smooth, really kind of a neat look. I'm now going to use the shop grit, and that'll get the mineral oil, beeswax, little carnauba, and that F2 pumice will kind of just fill any other little holes we have left over from voids in that and soak up into the wood and really give it a pretty look. I have just enough of it left for this one last pass. And I'm going to grab a blue shop towel to do this. That's always been the preferred method. And we're going to apply it at about 600 RPM. And then we're going to speed it up to about 1500 RPM and work it off until the towel is completely clean. So this shop grit is F2 pumice, mineral oil, beeswax, and that's about it. I got a little bit of sawdust in it, unfortunately, right now. Let's turn the speed way down. Doesn't splash all over the place. I'm going in reverse right now to apply it. You really want to get it to soak in there. After I get a light application like this, I will turn it off. And we'll go around and rub it all the way in. And this is going to take out those 800 grit sanding lines. And I know 800 grit sanding lines aren't a big deal, but in the reality is we want it to be as clear and clean as we can. And it's going to soak up the mineral oil in here into the plywood ends, which will help us get a really nice finish when we move over to the hard wax. Now you could spray this with lacquer, and maybe for a table lamp or a decorative lamp like this, maybe that might be the right way to go. Lacquer is not my jam. I don't do a lot of lacquering or spraying. I do have some of the gear to do it, but I've just never really quite gotten good enough at it where I feel comfortable putting it on a piece. And this is prototype of a larger concept, like I was saying, for our lake communities around here. So hopefully it'll turn out well. Okay, we've got that saturated all over the piece. Now we are going to get the fresh side of the towel, crank the speed up, and polish that in. I'm in at about, let's see where we can get to. Yep, I'm in at 1200 RPM right now. Again, just a blue shop towel. I'm going in reverse, spinning away from me. So you can see that goo there, all coming off. We'll move over to this side of the towel that's cleaner. And I'll end up getting a fresh towel here in a second, or we might even use a terry. Although terry on plywood, sometimes there's still a little sharp edge somewhere we wouldn't want to catch a towel. Again, I'm holding the towel with my thumb. It could pull right out of my hand if I needed to. If it caught on something, it would just leave my hand. It wouldn't take my hand with it. You can see we're still dirty. Got a clean section of towel again. And once the towel comes back clean, we know we've got everything off of it we're going to. I put a little bit of pressure. Not a ton, but a little bit, probably 15-20% of what I could get away with my limited old man strength. So come back across here, and it's coming off clean now. So now it is ready for our shop shine. And again, that's just going to be mineral oil, beeswax, carnauba, and a little lemon essence. It's got a nice look to it. It's got some nice chatoyancy too. And again, it's not going to have a perfect finish when you get down and look close at it, just because there's plywood. You know, plywood has little voids and gaps, but you don't really see the sanding lines except for what's in the actual plywood itself. So I think that's a pretty cool look. And so let's get another fresh towel and some shop shine. And again, shop shine is my version of Woodworking McDaniel styles shine. I didn't invent this. I just kind of tweaked it my way. And again, in the comments, if you'd like to see how I make it and get the recipe and stuff, just let me know. I've shared the recipe a few times with folks in comments, but I've never actually done a demonstration on how I make it. So again, I'm going to saturate this. It's going to take a lot because it is plywood. It's going to soak it up, but we'll get it on there. Oh, it smells so nice too. That little extra lemon essence seems to really do something. I don't know if it helps the shine or not, but it sure makes it smell nice. And after we have it all on here, it's going to sit up for about 15 minutes, and then I will come back and we will buff it off. Okay, again, the magic of video. We'll be right back to it in a second here, but I'm going to go take a walk and give it 15 minutes to set up. And once it's nice and hard, we'll buff it off. Okay, it's had some time to dry up now, or harden a bit. I'm going to get out a shop cloth, which is like a car wash terry here, and we're going to go ahead and buff that out. And then we're going to put a tenon on this end, and it'll be ready for us to do the next section of the gluing. Now we're still going in reverse, not holding the towel hard, just letting the towel on top. I'm holding it on the back over here, pressure down with my right hand, holding it back on my left. It warms up pretty quick at 1200 RPM and gives us a pretty nice buff there. Now we can still take that to the wheel over on the Beal system and do another shine on it if we want, but I think for this, that's about it right there. You can still see, typical plywood imperfections, but when you run your hand over it, it feels smooth as glass. So I'm going to put it in forward now, roll the towel over, holding it like this, thumbs, fingers, not wrapped around my hand, and get a good buff in it this direction. And that heats up pretty quick. Nice friction, and there we go. Okay, it's time for me to go ahead and put a tenon on it over here so that we can set that into the base, and then we'll get around to making up a base. I haven't even milled the lumber for it yet because I wasn't sure this was going to turn out. But I'll pull this all off after we put a tenon on so we can see how that glass insulator is going to look. I'm going to move from the robust tool rest. Actually, I think it'll still fit over here. Now, let's go ahead and get the smaller tool rest just to make our lives a little bit easier. These big 15-inch tool rests are so nice when you're working on long things, and robust does make a phenomenal one. I saw that Trent Bosch has a new tool rest out, and I have been very interested in giving that a shot. So if we take a look here at our total diameter, it should be close to 6 inches, and through the middle there we're about 5.5, and up on the top up here we shrunk down to about 3 inches. So I don't think my big jaws will fit on that. So we're going to have to do too small for the big jaws to, well, if I put a teeny, now let's just go ahead and zip in there. The tenon is not going to be held in anything. It's just to flatten the bottom out and sink it into the base. So for that, I'm going to use a skew, a nice sharp skew. Yep, got a good edge on it, face mask down. And we're just going to come in and try to peel that bottom edge off a little bit and give it a little anchoring. Slowly lift the handle in. So with that, we'll have a nice flat base. I left about 1.5 inches down here, and we're ready to pull it off of this and look at what our base should look like. Give me a second, I'll flip it around and get you guys a good new camera angle so you can see the final look here. Okay, that's the idea right there. We've got our lighthouse. We've got our glass insulator on top for the light part. We're going to actually put a lamp in there. We'll wire that up here pretty soon. And now we just need a nice base for it. So the options here are pretty easy. We can do a square base, which will sit flat like a lighthouse would be sitting on a square base, and then goes round up to the top. And I think that looks pretty good. Kind of interesting. So let's get to figuring out which base material to use and how we want to affix that glass insulator. My plan still is to put a little rim around here. You know, lighthouses have a little shelf around the light on the top. And I think we want to glue up a nice little shelf for that. So we'll probably do that with some padauk. Let's see what we got back in the scrap bin. Okay, I kicked this around for a little while, trying to figure out the best way to make this little round part up here, since I didn't do it in the beginning. Like I should have probably just glued it up as part of the whole glue up, but I didn't want to waste any wood not knowing if this was gonna work or not. So I decided to use my bottle stopper jig here. And what I did is I took a piece of padauk and I scribed my lines. This would be my outside diameter. It's the inside diameter for the glass insulator I'm going to use.
The Hemingray No. 17 glass insulator is a vintage item that was originally used to protect power lines from voltage crossover. It was produced in mass quantities, making it relatively common.
Switched to a smaller one. I thought it looked better. This one's a Hemingray No. 17. Made in the USA. It says 66-42 on it. I'll have to look that up and see if that says anything. But I went ahead and threaded the hole. Hopefully you can see that in there, just like you would a bottle stopper. And I figured I could probably use my bottle stopper jig to do this if we can get a nice flat top. It'd be just like using a screw chuck, as far as my brain can think about it. And I got a really good thread. Padauk threads so nicely. Look at that. Just swoop right on. Nice tight fit there. I'll definitely be standing out of the line of fire, but I thought that'd be kind of an easy way to kind of get our shape that we're looking for. And I don't think I need anything crazy here. You know, just use a bowl gouge and some patience, and let's see if that works. Again, just pulled this one out of the old idea hole to see if it works. So I'm going to stand way out of the line of fire, spin it up here. Looks to me like we can... Yeah, it spins up just fine at 1,000 RPM. So let's get our face mask on, get out our bowl gouge, and see if we can make a little place for the lighthouse keeper to walk around and tend to the light. Again, since it's so fragile out there, I'm just kind of taking light passes, getting myself around, not trying to do any hero things here. I'm sure there's a better way to do it. This is what I came up with. Whew, I do remember how much I love the way padauk smells, but boy, it's going to cover everything in red. Look at how it cuts. Just cuts so nice. Really can't beat that. That's just pretty. Let's see if we can get a little coming the other direction here, out of the line of fire. Okay, feels like it's cutting pretty good there. Now I know that I started with a much larger piece of wood than I needed, but that's what I had. So let's see. We'll have our, don't think it needs to be quite that wide. But we also want to make sure that it's wider than the 3 inches our top is up here. We're 3 1/4. We want this to be at least 3 1/2. And yeah, my inside circle is perfect for that. So we'll keep wasting that wood. Guess there's no other way to look at it. Guess I could try to cut a ring out of it, but I don't know what I would do with it later. So we'll just keep going that route. Switch to a smaller bowl gouge here real quick if it has an edge. And it does. Looks like a UFO. Okay, look at that. Nice cuts there. I'll get one more tight cut here on the padauk, and then we'll start working on some detail up here. And this is just going to be more creating a recess for our insulator, for our Lighthouse Fresnel. Okay, that should be pretty good. Doesn't even look like it needs much sanding for what we're doing here. And we need to step down, and for that I'm going to use a very sharp parting tool to get my initial line in. We'll just make sure we can fit our insulator just right. Slightly elevated handle. Now that we've got our line defined, I'm going to use the bowl gouge. Just leave about an 1/8 inch material. Let's see if that fits in there okay. It's a little bit loose. And the reason for wanting it to sit in there is so we can kind of tie in some other features here aesthetically. That did the trick. Clearly my measurement wasn't right on. Okay, that's right in there now. So that's not going to go anywhere. And we can sink that a little bit more. I'm going to put a nice sharp edge on this. Be right back. So what we want to do is then we'll round off from that edge to make our decoration. Comes over, so now we can round this up. I think it's too thick as it stands on its own for that, so we might pull the front down to this spot, and then we know that that's our rim, and then we'll just slowly pull this out, and then we'll create a bead on the outside. I think that would be a nice look for our lighthouse. More like a fancy coaster than what I'm thinking of right now. And we'll round up this bottom over here a little bit. So now when we're looking at it, we're really doing more of a sculpture than we are anything else. But this is going to be what holds our insulator up here. Don't get it overdone. So I really don't want to have to glue this on. I want gravity to hold that on. And the reason for that is so that we can easily change the light bulb. To support our fixture. So our actual fixture, the light socket itself, is a candelabra at E12. I can still come in a little bit more, but we're getting the general fit. I want it to be pretty good tight fit there. I don't want it to move around. So pardon me for all the stopping and starting, but this is how I kind of creep up on fits. Okay, now we've got a nice tight fit in there. There's a little rock, so I'm going to take it in probably less than 2 or 3 thousandths, to be honest. I just want a slightly tighter fit, and I'm going to bring it in. It'll go in at a slight angle, just a teeny bit of an angle. One of the things about padauk that's so lovely is you really don't even have to sand it. There you go. Now that's in there. Obviously it's not a friction fit, I still have to clean this, but that'll be a nice little cap up there. So I'm going to go ahead and blow this off, get all this red sawdust out of here, and then we'll throw some wax on this one. Like I said, padauk cuts so easy. You can start at 320. You don't really have to do anything crazy if you got sharp tools. It's one of the funnest woods to turn if you're new to turning. And I always save the sawdust, believe it or not, because it's a great filler. I use it with a lot of my little epoxy projects and stuff. So I'll throw this into my padauk bag, just a little bit of it. I'm actually going to just start right out at 320. There we go. That's all we need is just a little denibbing here, a few little fine lines out. Let me turn that dust collector back. Rounding over any of the sharp corners. I don't want anything that's going to cut. I'm not even going to skip the entire step of using our, using the shop shine and go straight to the wax. Just a little wax here. Go and do the inside because you'll be able to see it through the glass. I don't put too much wax on the bottom because I still have to glue it in place. Go over to the dry portion of the towel. And we should be able to just, with a little bit of luck here, well, I'm going to have to grab a spanner. Get out a pair of channel locks here for this one. We should be able to just screw that right off from our chuck, just like you're using a screw chuck, except for it's a bottle stopper chuck. Got a spot down here I'll have to sand to get a good thing. But you can see the threads in there and where it came up flat. Now I'm going to go over here. Well, let's see if I can bring it over so you guys can see it here. I don't want to smooth this out of the way. I'll probably have to take another picture here, but I just want to show you the kind of the concept here. And we'll put the holes in there. And then arc goes up there, and that really makes a difference. I'll pull you off the camera here and show you the other side before we all right, there's our finished lighthouse with our little light on top there and a glass insulator. I ended up just go ahead and stacking, so I didn't show this in the video. I just stacked 6.5 by 6.5 inch pieces of plywood, glued it together, sanded and polished the edges so it's nice, kind of complementary look. For the base, I just drilled into the side to run the power cord in, and then up through the bottom. It's got a 3/8 inch lamp cord in it, and our little padauk ring up there to hold our little Fresnel. It turned out pretty cool. Let me know if you have any questions. I can go into more detail on anything here, but this is how the project turned out. Little stacked plywood lighthouse. Again, my name's Tony. I appreciate you guys joining me. Hope you had a good time. If I earned your subscription and your like, I'd sure appreciate it. Any comments are always welcome. Even the negative ones help me grow. So thank you very much and have a great day. Get out there and turn something.